My stepmom looked me dead in the eyes and whispered, "Tell me I'm not crazy." That night, everything I thought I knew about my family, about right and wrong, shattered in one quiet moment we could never undo. This isn't just a story about a forbidden connection. It's about guilt, temptation, and the terrifying moment when you realize there's no turning back. Stay with me till the end. You won't believe how it all unravels. If this story pulled you in, don't forget to like the video and hit follow for more real-life confessions that will keep you up at night. It all started on a Friday evening that felt no different from any other. Quiet, routine, forgettable. My dad was headed out on one of his usual weekend fishing trips, the kind he'd been taking since I was in middle school. That meant the house would be just me and my stepmother, Laura. She was the kind of woman who always had everything under control, organized, calm, distant enough to keep boundaries clear. So when she asked me to stay home that weekend instead of going out with friends, I didn't think twice. "Just keep an eye on the house," she said with a smile, pouring herself a glass of wine. "You know how your dad worries." At the time, it felt completely normal. I was 21. I had just started community college and was mostly focused on finishing assignments, picking up part-time work, and avoiding unnecessary drama. Laura. She married my dad 6 years ago, and though we weren't exactly close, we got along fine. She was polite, supportive even, but never personal. That night, after I finished some reading for class, I went downstairs to grab a drink. The house was quiet, too quiet. Laura was sitting on the couch with the lights dimmed and a movie playing softly in the background. She looked up when she saw me and gave a half smile. "Hey, Alex, come sit for a minute," she said, patting the spot next to her. I hesitated. There was nothing weird about it. We'd watched movies together before, especially if Dad was gone. But something in her voice, her tone maybe, made me pause. Still, I shrugged it off and sat down, leaving a safe gap between us. "What are you watching?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned toward me slightly, tugging one leg beneath her. "You've changed so much," she said suddenly. "You're not that skinny teenager anymore." I laughed nervously, unsure of how to respond. I guess college does that to people. She smiled again, but this time it was slower, more thoughtful. "It's not just that," she said. "You've grown into yourself. You carry yourself differently." There was something in the way she said it that made the air feel heavy. I didn't know what to say, so I just stared at the TV, pretending to care about the movie. "I've been meaning to talk to you," she added, almost under her breath. I turned to her, surprised. "About what?" She looked me in the eyes, and for a second, I forgot how to breathe. "Us." My heart skipped. "What do you mean, us?" "You know what I mean," she said, her voice steady but low. "You've felt it too, the way things have changed." I shook my head instinctively. "No, Laura, I don't think this is..." She leaned in just slightly. "Don't lie to me, Alex." And that's when it hit me. This wasn't a joke. She wasn't being playful. The look in her eyes, intense, unwavering, told me she was serious. Too serious. I stood up fast, like the couch burned me. "Laura, this is insane," I said, my voice cracked with disbelief. "You're married to my dad." She didn't follow right away, just sat there, watching me, a strange sadness flickering in her expression. And then she said something I'll never forget. "You ever feel like you're living someone else's life? Like the choices you made years ago trapped you?" I didn't answer. Couldn't. The silence in the room was suffocating. "Maybe it's not about rules," she whispered. "Maybe it's about truth." And just like that, I realized we had crossed an invisible line, and neither of us knew how to step back. The next morning was awkward in all the ways you'd expect. I stayed in my room longer than usual, pretending to be asleep just to avoid crossing paths with her. But I couldn't hide forever. Eventually, hunger got the best of me, and I crept downstairs, hoping she'd be out running errands or maybe still asleep. She wasn't. Laura was in the kitchen, barefoot, wearing one of those long cardigans that looked cozy but somehow still elegant. She glanced over her shoulder when she heard me, and her eyes lingered just a second too long. Morning, she said, her voice neutral, controlled. Morning, I mumbled back, heading straight for the fridge and grabbing a bottle of orange juice just to have something to focus on. I didn't know what to say. What do you say after your stepmother implies something unspeakable? We moved around each other in silence, both pretending we were fine, that the night before hadn't happened. But every moment was loaded. I felt her eyes on me when I turned away, felt the tension humming beneath every word, every movement. By mid-afternoon, I decided I needed some air. I grabbed my keys and told her I was heading out. Where to? She asked casually, leaning against the doorframe. Just out, I said, not even looking back. Okay, be careful. It sounded normal, but it wasn't. Everything was different now. The air in that house felt thick, heavy, with something unspoken. I didn't go far, just sat in my car, parked down the street, trying to process what the hell was happening. I replayed everything in my head. Her voice, her words, the look in her eyes. And worst of all, how I hadn't completely pulled away. I hated myself for that. I stayed out for hours, hoping the distance would cool whatever this was. That maybe I was just overthinking. That when I got back, it would all feel like a misunderstanding. But it didn't. That night, around 9 o'clock, I came back and found the house dimly lit again. Laura was on the couch, wrapped in a throw blanket, a half-empty glass of wine on the coffee table. You okay? She asked when she saw me. Her tone was soft, almost maternal, like nothing had happened. I gave her a stiff nod. Yeah. I was halfway to the stairs when she spoke again. Alex, we need to talk. I stopped. My fingers tightened around the banister. Every nerve in my body screamed for me to just keep walking. To go to my room, close the door, and forget any of this had ever happened. But I didn't. I turned around slowly. She was still seated, her face unreadable in the low light. I didn't sit, just hovered near the edge of the room. What do you want to say? She hesitated, like she was choosing her words carefully. I know this is confusing. I know it's not what either of us expected. I laughed bitterly. You think? She looked down, then back up at me. I don't want you to think I'm trying to ruin anything. This wasn't planned, Alex. Then what is it? I asked. What do you want from me? Laura's expression shifted. Softer now, sadder. I don't know, she admitted. But it's not just me. I see it in your face, in the way you look at me. I felt my breath catch. I'm not saying this is right, she continued. I'm just saying it's real. That word, real, hit me harder than I expected. Because she was right. As much as I wanted to deny it, something was happening. Something dangerous. Something wrong, but also undeniable. I don't know what to do with that, I said, my voice cracking. She stood up slowly, the blanket falling away from her shoulders, and for a second, I thought she was going to walk away. But instead, she stepped closer. Neither do I, she whispered. We stood there, inches apart, in a silence so heavy I could hear my own heartbeat. And then, just like that night before, it happened again. A touch. Her hand on mine. A look. And before I knew it, we were inches from repeating something we both knew we shouldn't. But this time, we stopped. Not because we didn't want to, but because we both knew. The next step meant no turning back. The days that followed felt like walking across a frozen lake, knowing the ice could crack any second. Laura and I avoided each other, or at least pretended to. But the truth was, even in silence, even without words, everything between us buzzed with tension. I stopped eating meals in the kitchen and started skipping breakfast just so I wouldn't accidentally run into her. When I heard her footsteps coming down the stairs, I'd slip out the front door under the pretense of going for a walk or running errands. Anything to keep from being alone in the same room with her. But the house was only so big, and avoiding her didn't erase what had already happened. If anything, it made it worse. Like the pressure was building behind a wall we refused to acknowledge. Every glance we shared when we did cross paths said 1,000 things neither of us dared to speak. One night, I was up late working on an assignment in the living room. I thought she'd gone to bed. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that usually helped me focus. Until I heard the soft creak of the floorboards behind me. I didn't turn around. I didn't have to. I couldn't sleep, she said. Her voice was gentle, careful. I stayed glued to my laptop screen. Maybe you should try. She didn't respond right away. I could feel her presence behind me, like heat radiating off a fire. Finally, she walked past me and sat on the armchair across the room. She wasn't wearing her usual robe, just a t-shirt and leggings, simple, but somehow still made my thoughts spiral. I hate this, she whispered after a few moments. Hate what? I asked, though I already knew. This, pretending like nothing happened, like we don't feel what we feel. I finally looked at her. Her eyes weren't flirty or playful. They were sad, tired, honest. I don't know what you want from me, Laura, I said. I don't even know what I want. She sat forward, her elbows resting on her knees. I don't want to mess up your life, or mine, or your dad's, but I can't lie anymore, Alex. The way she said my name, it wasn't seductive, it wasn't calculated, it was human, real. I swallowed hard, my chest tightening. We can't do this. We already crossed a line and we stopped, she cut in. We didn't go any further. Doesn't that count for something? I laughed under my breath, but there was no humor in it. Only if stopping once means we won't do it again. Laura stood slowly, walked over to the window, and stared out into the darkness. Do you remember when we first met? She asked. I didn't answer. You were 15. You barely spoke to me for the first 6 months. I thought you hated me. I shook my head. I didn't hate you. I just didn't know how to handle someone new in the house. She turned back to face me. And then one day, you asked me if I wanted help with the garden. Out of nowhere. I remember, I said softly. You smiled at me that day. And I remember thinking, maybe he's starting to let me in. I didn't expect it to feel good. Not like that. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were glassy with something deeper. I'd never seen her like this before, unguarded, vulnerable. I never planned any of this, she said. I'm not trying to justify anything. I just needed you to know that it didn't come out of nowhere for me. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't move. The weight of her words wrapped around me like a net. And then, without thinking, I spoke. I think about that night, all the time. She looked at me startled. Hope flickered across her face. I try not to, I continued, but I do. Every single day. The room was silent. The kind of silence that only exists right before something irreversible. I'm scared, she admitted, of what this means, of what we're becoming. So am I whispered. And for the first time since it all began, we weren't hiding. We were two people, standing at the edge of something that could destroy everything. And neither of us stepped back. The days after that conversation blurred together like smeared ink. Nothing felt real, and yet everything felt too real. I went through the motions of my classes, pretended to laugh at friends' jokes, answered texts like I was still myself. But inside, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. Laura and I didn't talk much. Not about that night, not about the things we'd said, but there was a shift. An unspoken understanding that we'd peeled away the last layer of denial, and that nothing would ever be the same again. One Friday evening, my dad texted me from work to say he'd be out late, some issue at the warehouse. He'd probably crash at the office couch again. I stared at the screen for a long time, not sure if I should be relieved or afraid. Laura didn't say anything about it. She just cooked dinner like usual. Spaghetti, garlic bread, salad. She set the table for 2. I stayed upstairs until the smell of food became impossible to ignore. When I finally walked down, she was already sitting, sipping wine from a glass that never seemed to empty. I made your favorite, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. Thanks, I replied, sitting across from her. We ate mostly in silence, the only sounds the clink of forks against plates and the occasional distant car outside. But underneath it all was a storm brewing. Loud, violent, impossible to ignore. After dinner, I stood to take my plate to the sink. "I'll wash," I offered. "You don't have to," she said quietly. "Just sit for a bit." I hesitated, then nodded and returned to the table. She poured herself another glass of wine and finally looked at me. Really looked. "We can't keep pretending this tension doesn't exist," she said softly. I swallowed hard. "I know." She leaned back in her chair, eyes glossy but clear. "I've been trying to convince myself that I'm in control, that this isn't bigger than me. But it is. I can't lie to myself anymore." "Then what are we supposed to do?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Keep walking into this, knowing where it leads?" Laura stared at her glass. "I don't know, but I also don't know how to walk away." We sat in silence for a long while. It wasn't like before, tense and dangerous. It was sad, heavy with the realization that even when you see the edge of the cliff, sometimes you still step forward. "I think we've already crossed the line," I finally said. "Maybe we crossed it the moment we let ourselves wonder." She nodded slowly. "Yeah." Later that night, I found myself pacing in my room, the weight of everything pressing down like wet cement. I couldn't think, couldn't sleep. The hallway outside was dark, still. I opened my door and stepped out, not sure what I was doing, only that I couldn't stay frozen anymore. The light from the living room spilled into the hallway. I walked toward it, each step loud in my ears. Laura was on the couch again, the same throw blanket wrapped around her legs, the TV playing something neither of us cared about. She looked up when she saw me, her expression unreadable. I didn't say anything. I just sat down, leaving a cautious space between us. We sat like that for a while. Two people, lost in something we didn't fully understand. And then she spoke. "I don't want to hurt anyone," she said. "I know. But I'm tired of pretending." "So am I." Our hands met in the middle of the couch, fingertips brushing. And this time, there was no pulling away. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Tell me I'm not crazy." "You're not," I whispered back. And just like that, the space between us disappeared. Not in a storm of passion, not in some reckless, wild moment, but in a quiet surrender. Two people falling into the gravity they'd been resisting for too long. I don't remember how long we sat like that, or how many times we almost spoke, but didn't. All I remember is the weight of her hand in mine, and the knowledge that there was no turning back. After that night, the world didn't implode. The sun rose. Birds chirped. My dad came home Saturday morning with a cooler full of fish and stories about the one that got away. Laura hugged him at the door, smiled like nothing had happened, and offered to make breakfast. And I stood in the kitchen, watching her move around like she hadn't just crossed a line with his son. Everything looked normal, but nothing felt normal. I couldn't look my dad in the eye. Every word out of my mouth felt like a lie I hadn't even spoken. Every moment I spent under the same roof with both of them made my skin crawl. Not because of them, but because of me. Because of what I knew, and what I had let happen. And what I knew might happen again. The weeks that followed were like being trapped in a double life. On the outside, I was the responsible son, cleaning the yard, doing well in school, helping around the house. But underneath it all was something darker. Every stolen glance with Laura across the dinner table, every casual touch that lingered a moment too long when my dad wasn't looking, added another layer to the secret we were now both chained to. I kept trying to stop it, swore I'd keep my distance, avoid being alone with her. But somehow, every time my dad left for work or ran an errand, Laura found her way to me. It wasn't always physical. Sometimes it was just her standing too close in the kitchen, handing me a plate with her fingers brushing mine. Other times, it was a look, a silent message passed across the room that left me breathless and ashamed. And sometimes, it wasn't subtle at all. One afternoon, while Dad was out at a work meeting, I was in the living room trying to focus on homework. Laura walked in with 2 glasses of iced tea and sat beside me like it was nothing. "You look tense," she said softly, handing me a glass. "I'm fine." "You're not." I tried to keep my eyes on my laptop, but she gently closed it. Talk to me. I shook my head. What's there to say? This is messed up, Laura. You know that. I do, she said, almost instantly. But that doesn't change how I feel. She leaned in, and I felt it again. That same current between us. That pull I hated but couldn't resist. We can't keep doing this, I said, more to myself than her. I'm not asking for forever, she whispered. I just don't want to pretend I don't feel something when I do. And I didn't stop her when she kissed me again. It was softer this time, slower. Like we both knew we were dancing on a cliff's edge, but didn't care about the fall anymore. When it was over, we sat in silence. Her hand stayed on mine, our fingers barely intertwined. I wish things were different, she said after a long pause. Me too. But wishing didn't change reality. The real turning point came one Tuesday evening. Dad said he had to head back to the office to deal with payroll issues. He left around 6 p.m., kissed Laura on the cheek, gave me a pat on the back, and drove off like any other night. I stayed in the kitchen, trying to distract myself by cooking dinner. Something basic, like boxed mac and cheese. Anything to keep my hands busy and my brain numb. Laura walked in just as I was draining the noodles. Smells good, she said, her voice soft. Trying not to think, I replied honestly. She didn't respond, just stood there for a moment before walking over and placing her hand lightly on my back. I froze. Don't, I said quietly. Not tonight. Okay, she whispered, and pulled away. We ate in silence again, the tension thick but unspoken. Afterward, she started loading the dishwasher while I wiped down the counters. We moved around the kitchen like strangers who used to know each other. And then, just as I turned to grab a towel, we heard it. The sound of the front door opening. Keys jangling. My dad's voice. Hey, forgot my laptop. Be right out. Time stopped. Laura's eyes met mine, wide, terrified. I backed away from her like she was on fire. She spun around and started wiping her hands, pretending to be busy at the sink. My dad walked in seconds later, casual as ever, and I stood there, heart pounding, praying he didn't notice the storm that had just passed through the room. My dad stood in the doorway, laptop bag slung over his shoulder, eyes scanning the kitchen like it was just another Tuesday night. Smells like mac and cheese, he said, chuckling. Hope you left me some. Yeah, I managed to say, my voice strained. There's a bowl in the fridge. Laura didn't turn around. She just kept wiping an already clean dish with shaking hands. I could feel her panic crawling under her skin. And mine too. Dad grabbed his laptop off the counter, then turned to me. You good? He asked, eyeing me for a moment longer than felt casual. Yeah, just tired. He nodded. All right, see you two later. Don't burn the house down. We both stood frozen until the front door shut again. Then silence. Not just the absence of noise, but the kind of silence that settles in when you know something almost happened. Something that could have destroyed everything. I finally spoke. That was close. Laura nodded, her face pale. Too close. I sat down at the kitchen table, trying to slow my breathing. The weight of what we were doing suddenly felt unbearable. Like a dam about to burst. This has to stop, I said, staring at the floor. For real this time. I know, she whispered. But she didn't move. She just stood there, one hand braced against the counter, like she needed help staying upright. I can't live like this, I continued, lying every day, pretending I'm someone I'm not, looking him in the eye and knowing what we've done. She nodded again, eyes glassy now. I thought I could handle it, she said. Thought if we kept it hidden, it wouldn't matter. But I was wrong. I feel like I'm disappearing. We both sat in the heavy truth of that moment. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to hate myself more. But all I could feel was a hollow ache where certainty used to be. I need space, I said finally. I need to go. Just for a while. Laura looked up, panicked. Leave? Not forever. Just enough to remember who I am. She didn't argue. She just nodded. biting her lip like she might fall apart if she spoke. I packed that night. Just a bag, some clothes, my laptop, a notebook. I didn't tell my dad the truth. Said I needed a break from school stress and wanted to stay with a friend for a week or two. He offered me gas money and told me to be careful. Laura didn't come out to say goodbye. And that felt like the only thing that made sense. It's been almost 8 months since I left. I never told anyone what really happened in that house. Laura and my dad are still together. I see them sometimes. On FaceTime, during holidays. She's always polite, careful, distant, the way she used to be. And me? I'm still figuring things out. Sometimes, late at night, I think about those weeks. How quickly everything spiraled. How easy it was to cross lines you swore you never would. And I wonder if it meant more to me than it did to her. Or if we both just got lost in something neither of us had the courage to stop. But I'm not angry anymore. Just tired. Wiser, maybe. There are moments that brand themselves into your life. Moments you don't talk about, not because you're hiding, but because saying them out loud would make them real again. This story isn't about love. It's about consequence. It's about what happens when silence speaks louder than truth, and when crossing a line means you can never go back.